Contracts is the next item to talk about in the unified process. So to summarize a bit, we've talked about use cases where we take user actions against the system, and we've talked about how to translate them into system sequence diagrams where each action that a user takes against the system is translated into some API call of some form. Now, contracts is the next step of moving forward into designing the actual system. So what we have is that we have, for each of these calls into the system, what happens in the system. And that's what we're trying to describe in a contract. So we're opening up this black box where everything is just the system and we don't care what's happening inside, but we're slowly opening this up and see what is going to happen inside the system when we call a particular event upon the system. You can view this as a stage and curtain model, where you're looking at the stage, the curtains are open, things are placed in a particular way on stage, actors are standing in one particular way, and then you close the curtains. And then things happen, and you open the curtains again, and then you look at what changes have been made. So you may have a different background, you may have moved a flower, you may have a different actor standing on stage or whatever. Same thing with the system. So when you look at the system as it is, you have a specific set of objects available, you have a specific set of relations between those objects, and each object has specific values on their respective attributes. And then you close the curtains. Once you call a method, enter item or whatever, and then you close the curtains. And then things happen inside the system, and then you look at what has happened once you open the curtains again. The things that can change in terms of state or system state is, as I mentioned, you have instances of different concepts. So you have items in your trolley, for example, or shopping cart. The values of those concepts or attributes in these concepts. So the number of items in your shopping cart will have changed. The actual items in the shopping cart will have changed. And then you have associations, links between instances. You may form new links, you may break links. There's a basic contract and there's an extended contract. I'm coming back to the extended later on. The basic contract format is that you have a name for the contract, typically related to the system call that you're making in order to initiate the contract. You have a brief description of what it does, and then you have preconditions, and then you have postconditions. Preconditions, how will the stage look like before you close the curtains, and postconditions, well, what will have happened once this contract has been executed. So let's look at an example. Here's the enter item, barcode quantity, which is the name of the contract. You recognize it from the system sequence diagram, I hope. Responsibilities of this contract is that it records the sale of an item and adds it to the sale, and it should display the item description and price. Preconditions is that we have a started sale. We are in the process of entering items. Postconditions. So you notice I'm talking about objects here. They're underlined and there's a colon in front of them. We have created a sales item, and we have associated this sales item with the current sale, and we have set the quantity to the number of items that we had of this type. So looking at it in a graph way, we have the sale, the current sale, and we now have a new association, new aggregation here to a sales item. Let's name it SI. We have the quantity 5, and the barcode that we were using is the product ID of this sales item. And I'm not sure this should actually be there. This is something that happens when the curtains are closed. It's not something that we have to worry about in the contract, I think. So that's how you describe the post conditions, at least. the textual description, I think, is the most important if you listen to the designers of Unified Process. The preconditions, those are, as I said, the assumptions that you have before the operation begins. This is how things that has to be in place before you can execute this contract. The Unified Process says that you shouldn't test these in the operation. You shouldn't verify that these preconditions hold true, but the caller should make sure that these preconditions have been met before you actually execute this method. I am not so sure about this. I kind of like the idea of defensive programming where you fail early, fail hard, so you can fix it. Otherwise, it's so easy that things fall between the cracks, and before you know it, you've shipped something to the customer or deployed it somewhere, and this doesn't work. Well, no, because you didn't ensure that the preconditions were met on this system operation. Well, why didn't anyone tell me? Right. So I would advocate instead that you make sure that you do have asserts or something neater in your code to make sure that preconditions, if you have preconditions that are so critical that you can't program around them, fail early. Have a test case that you can fail early that, well, these preconditions aren't met properly. Post conditions, they should be declarative. So describing this has happened. There's no order in them. There can't be because you're not executing them. You're describing things that have happened, and therefore the order shouldn't matter. There are no actions performed in the post conditions. They only describe actions that have happened, and the state changes accordingly. Things that actually doesn't change the state, like displaying a spinning beach ball during the operation, doesn't change the state once it's finished, so you won't describe them in the post conditions. And as before, we can create or delete an instance of an object or a concept. We can modify an attribute, or we can create or delete an association between different instances. And those are the things that we use to build up the state changes and describe the state changes that we've had in a particular contract. Extended contract format is more or less the same thing, only more of it. Same thing, we have the name, we have the responsibilities. We can describe different types, different classes of contracts. This case is just a system. It might be a particular subsystem that's involved, or whatever. We can cross-reference it to different use cases, different requirements, other contracts. So we put this particular contract into a context. We can add notes to it if we want to see, well, if there's a database query involved in this case, for example, well, we should monitor the speed of that so we can keep our quality requirements as well on performance, for example. Different exceptions, things that can go wrong. So this is sort of what I was talking about, defensive programming. So here they're actually checking one of the preconditions that there is that the barcode is valid. If it isn't, then there should be an error. There's no particular output. There's only state changes once you've done this. There should be one output saying that, well, this is now the total tally for your shopping cart, but that's another story. Preconditions, we've started a sale, which means in turn that the cashier is logged into the system and everything. And then the post conditions as before. We've created a sales item, we've associated it with the current sale, and we've set the quantity to the quantity from that we got in the system call. So very much the same, only that we can add more things like notes and exceptions and stuff. So if we have need for those, then we can extend our basic contract. If we don't have need for all of these things, well, then stick to the basic contracts is my advice.